On-air talent and personality, certainly is a personality for Snapback Sports. They just released their annual 2025 College Football Spark Notes Guide, and Tim Kalinowski is back with us to talk some college football. Tim, it's great to see you again. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, guys. How are you?
We are well, and we're looking forward to actually having some games to talk about, opposed to what we think is going to happen. 3-4 weeks from now, we're going to start to see some results on the field. With that in mind, I mean, all we can do right now is speculate and give our predictions and our prognostications and whatnot. It doesn't sound like you're all that high on Syracuse heading into this year. What's your biggest concern about the Orange in 2025?
I think it starts and ends with the schedule, fellas. I don't know how you guys feel, but it is incredibly daunting. I have them, aside from the, UConn and Colgate, there's very few teams on this schedule that I'm like, okay, yeah, for sure Syracuse is better on paper. Like, that's just how it is. Unfortunately, so much of this, as you go into college football and, people want to do their homework and all that sort of stuff. I go, really? The whole thing is just look at the schedule rankings of who has the most difficult schedule and who doesn't. That paints 90% of the picture, because these conferences now have so many teams that it's all about your draw, really. I mean, that's how we saw Indiana last year go into the playoff. It was a perfect mix of transfers, and I was kind of high on Indiana last year. I definitely didn't pick them to make the playoff, but I liked them to go over their win total just because of the schedule. And Syracuse really on the short end of the ACC draw here. And then additionally, of course, Tennessee and Notre Dame.
All right, so is it fair to say that the schedule, you said the schedule's at the top of your list. Are you buying in on Fran Brown, though, and on what you saw last year? Do you think this is just kind of a one-year dip, and that next year, they'll get, back to a bowl game and start being in the upper half of the ACC on a regular basis? Or are you concerned, long-term about the Orange?
Yeah, it's tough because relatively, right, the two recruiting classes and transfer classes he's brought in over the past 2 years have been, it's been talent that Syracuse hasn't seen in frankly, a really long time. So relative to that, the program's in really good shape. I just worry, number one, how long is Fran Brown going to stay here? Because we know how this works. Good talent gets plucked and, they move up the ranks. And then the other thing is, when you play this, kind of transfer roulette every single year, it's just very hard to predict. You have to bring in the right mix. You have to have, we think you want guys with experience, but then that's a whole can of worms. Do you want guys from experience, meaning like FCS experience? Because some teams have gone that direction. It's really difficult to say. I think the program is in as good a shape as it can be. But I think looking back to last year, if we could do it all again, we would say, man, they had a lot more experience than, we might have thought, or that, definitely was far more crucial than we would have thought.
When you look around the rest of the ACC, the ACC media poll came out a week or two ago. It's Clemson at the top. Miami, SMU, Georgia Tech, that's the top four. All four of those teams have legitimate stars at quarterback, guys who have played a lot of college football. No secret why they're at the top of these polls. When you look at those four teams, how would you kind of put the pecking order? What's your order of those four teams? And is there somebody outside of those four teams that you think can contend for the ACC title?
Yeah, I'm actually Clemson, Miami, Georgia Tech, Florida State. And then SMU's a little deeper down there. SMU, they had a really veteran roster last year. Yeah, Jennings is back, but they lose some of that, again, veteran presence. And SMU is a team that they were not recruiting at a Power 4 level, basically until they just got to the excuse me. Hairball until they just got to the ACC. So Georgia Tech, I'm really, really high on. And then Florida State, I have my doubts about Castellanos at quarterback. I watched a lot of him at BC. He's, I say in my Spark Notes, he either makes the greatest play you've ever seen or the worst play you've ever seen. So his ceiling is really high. And Florida State's talent, they reloaded with talent. I think that we're not going to see a 2-10 type Florida State team. So those would be my top four. Again, I'm really, really high on Georgia Tech this year. I think they could even sneak into the playoff.
When you look at some of the other conferences, I want to go to the Big Ten next. A lot of folks seem to be really high on Penn State, given that they've got virtually, everybody back. It is as much as you can in college football these days. They're loaded with talent from last year's squad. Ohio State obviously still in that conference. Michigan. I mean, do you give Penn State the edge in the Big Ten, or if not, who's your favorite?
I mean, Penn State's going to be my number one. If I had an AP poll, Penn State would be my number one team in the country, based off all the things you said with the returning talent. I actually have a take that they would be everybody's number one. They would be the favorite to win the national championship if the coach was anybody but James Franklin. It's just the fact that nobody trusts him. And I guess, rightfully so. I'm not like banging the drum here for James Franklin, but the record is obvious against, top 5 teams, ranked teams, all that sort of stuff. But their talent is immaculate. It is, Drew Aller. I feel like his comparison to me is like a Quinn Ewers. They both were big prospects coming out of high school, and they do enough, sure, but their full potential hasn't quite been unlocked. And he gets another year with Andy Kotelnicki, who was a big, offensive coordinator hire from Kansas 2 years ago. So yeah, Penn State for me, I think they're pretty loaded. And then Ohio State, like they look like, it's so funny. You do this research. I buy about half a dozen magazines, and you just see, an Ohio State team that lost a bunch of guys to the NFL. And then you see the newcomers, and it's just 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. So it's like, okay, yeah, I understand. But I'm going to go with what I know, players I've seen at the college level. And, Penn State for me is the edge, and they'd be my number one team in the country going into the year.
All right, let's go down to the SEC because SU's first opponent, of course, is from the SEC in the Tennessee Volunteers. What stands out to you about Tennessee? They're going through a quarterback change as well, just like Syracuse is. Defensively, it looks like they're going to be really good once again. What stands out to you about the Vols? Yeah,
Tennessee's a team I really like. Josh Heupel, and I was high on them, the last 2 years just because, I really believe in Heupel. But one of the most difficult things about this Tennessee team to handicap is the offense, because, the quarterback gets there late with the whole, UCLA, you went from App State to UCLA, now Tennessee. This is a tough offense to master. It's one of those types of offenses. Remember, we saw, Hendon Hooker put up some big numbers in it, but he had been very familiar with it. It's tough to pick up and then master. So I think they're going to lean on their defense a lot to start, like you said. But to me, in the SEC pecking order, I wouldn't have them ranked in the preseason top 25. I think that their schedule's pretty difficult, and they're just kind of there's like this whole mix in the SEC of like the middle class, and I think Tennessee's firmly in that SEC middle class.
Who's at the top of the SEC? Is it Georgia like we expect every year? Who's at the top for you?
It's Texas for me. They just talk about bringing in talent. They just brought in the number one recruiting class in 2025. Arch Manning, obviously all the hype there, but they just have name after name. They are a terrifying roster to look at on paper. And then actually I have Bama at 2 because Again, it's so funny. It's just talent. And I do believe in Kalen DeBoer, even though he doesn't wear polos, and that really angers the Alabama fans down there. And then I would have Georgia more in the 3 category. I'm interested in the quarterback, right? Stockton, we saw him at the end of last year. He was dealt the tough hand to come in after Beck was injured, but he seemed a little limited as a passer to me. And again, when you're looking at these SEC teams, like relatively, they're top 10 teams, but we got a nitpick. And then that's the beauty of college football. You say one little thing. Yeah, I'm a little skeptical of the quarterback. And then boom, oh, why do you hate our team?
You bring up Texas and Arch Manning. That kind of leads me to the Heisman race. He's certainly a popular pick. I've seen a lot of analysts say that they think Cade Klubnik from Clemson might be the best quarterback in the country. Who do you think is the best QB going into the season?
I think you got to feel really good about Cade Klubnik. And, I'm a Clemson. My mom played tennis at Clemson, so I'm a big Clemson fan. And I've watched him very closely. He's one of those guys, when he's on, he's as good as anyone. But there's something about Clemson that still hasn't fully clicked. I think we saw it, everyone's bullish on them because of that second half they had against Texas in the playoff. But still, that was kind of some circumstances at play there. I look at, He's probably in a great spot. Drew Aller's in a great spot. I would say kind of an off-the-radar name to know, Damon Williams. He's the quarterback at Washington, and he ended the year 6 touchdowns, 1 interception last 2.5 games or so. He is someone to watch. He'd be like a fun Heisman long shot, or at least if he's even in the mix, he can say that I told you so back in August.
Since you brought up odds, we'll get to your national title pick here in a second. But is there a bet that you really like, whether it's win total or somebody to make the college football playoff, or is there one bet that you really like going into this new season?
Yeah, first off, I think one of my favorite bets, unfortunately, fellas, is Syracuse under 5.5. But if that doesn't count, the Big 12 is wide open. There's about 7 teams that could win the Big 12. I like Texas Tech to win the Big 12. I like Texas Tech over wins. They're a team that I'm interested in having some financial stake on, especially because, too, quite an interesting situation. They just got, they had this huge fundraiser. Some oil guy sold his company, whatever, and he's liquid. And he donated like $1 trillion to the program. They got like the number one, they have the highest paid softball NIL player. So like they're throwing a lot of money at the program. Everything's bigger in Texas. They're a fun one I'm looking at is Texas Tech.
All right, I like it, and so with that, we got to get to your national title pick. Who do you think ultimately meet in the national title game, and who wins?
I think the national title is going to be Penn State and Clemson. And I think Clemson beats Penn State, and Dabo reminds everybody what Clemson, can do, what they're capable of. Their roster is laughably loaded. They could have 5 guys go in the first round. So it's a little biased, but honestly, when you're making a pick like this, I just really trust that they're getting out of the ACC, and then, it goes from there. The SEC, you could say Texas, Georgia, Alabama, whatever. We still don't know. Like, someone really good is going to get left out there. So I don't want those to be one of the teams I pick, even though, I have a ton of respect for them.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. And you're in really good company. We had Phil Steele on a couple weeks ago, and we asked for his pick, and he said Penn State against Clemson. Although I think he had Penn State winning the title. But yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of folks are very high on those two teams in particular. All right, Tim, we won't hold it against you that you picked the under for Syracuse. We love when you come on. Thanks so much for the time, and enjoy the college football season. Hopefully we can talk again soon.
Thank you, guys. Always appreciated.
All right, Tim Kalinowski joining us here on the show. And with that, phone lines open the rest of the way, 315-437-7644. We are back after this on ESPN Radio.